Hello, One Piece Pirates, and welcome back to another deck profile. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yadam, purple has been so overdone, but that doesn't mean that we can't make a deck profile for purple ourselves. We got to show you guys what we've been using here, and I'm going to give you guys some advice that I've given to literally my little brother. My little brother, he wanted to play One Piece, and he told me, hey, help me figure out a deck, and I want to play. He hasn't had any practice. I didn't put any games into it like myself. So we tried to go over like what mechanics he would like in terms of a card game. And they were just, it's a little overwhelming at first. And I'll be honest with you, just like starting any new card game, you have to learn so many cards. You have to think about what your opponent can have, and you got to learn the mechanics. So it's very difficult to introduce someone to a new card game. Fortunately enough, I was able to explain to him how Kaido worked. And because of his prior TCG knowledge in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Hearthstone, he was able to assimilate into the deck very, very well, and funnily enough, top a couple of events with it. I do believe this is one of the easier decks to pilot, and it's also one of the cheapest. So with both of that in mind, it's a very accessible deck for anyone. Can almost anyone can afford it. It's almost around like a $50 deck in its lowest rarity, as it is 75% of this deck comes from the structure deck, and the last 25 just is mostly commons. So I'm going to make this deck profile a little bit different to show you guys exactly what I played from the structure deck, what you get from the set, and how we make up just a very strong, and in my opinion, tier 1 deck from just a couple of old bucks. So I'm going to move Kaido off to the side and leave the cards from the set for later, and I'll start off with the structure deck. Now, one of the most impactful cards in the structure deck that really makes Kaido is here, Onigashima Island. And my goodness, if you've played this game at a competitive level, I'm sure you've seen this card more than you've wanted to. So although there are very few decks that play a stage, arguably no competitive deck plays a stage unless we're talking about 1000 Sunny, but even then, Onigashima Island is a stage on crack, on roids, on insert adjective of your choice. This card is unbelievably unbalanced. When they see this card on curve, the amount of plays that opens up to Kaido is a little bit overwhelming at times. Kaido being a deck that if they go on the play and they go first, they have no 1-drops. They go 3 into Onigashima Island, and then on turn 3, they're already dropping 7k attackers that are deleting the board. They're just double dipping while also clearing your opponent's characters. They're summoning big characters, and Onigashima is just allowing you to pay your taxes for free. It's just evading taxes left and right. This card is really, really good. Obviously, it's bad in multiples, and almost always, by what I've noticed that people say, I always want a hard mulligan for this card, as it just changes the speed of the deck. It is a slower deck, but Onigashima Island makes it so that the deck is almost at an adequate speed with everyone else, and at times, once they get to their late game, they outspeed everyone tenfold. So much top end, So definitely one of the most impactful cards from the structure deck. I cannot believe you get 4 of these, I believe, from one structure deck. And then we have 4 Black Marias. Now, Black Maria, yes, she's a 2k blocker, but yeah, she's a 2k blocker. I mean, it is what it is, a 2-drop blocker. Unfortunately, the game plan for Kaido, as you can see here with Onigashima Island, is ramp. We want to ramp, get to our late game, and start dropping our big impactful cards. How do we do that? Blocking, comboing, and stalling. And Black Maria stalls like no other. In this deck, I managed to almost max out on all the relevant blockers that purple has access to. And so Black Maria definitely gets into that spot. It is a 1k counter. With a 2k stat line, this card very rarely attacks, but you don't really care if this card ends up dying and comboing and or blocking an attack, as your whole purpose is just to get you to that late game where you can just start overwhelming your opponent with bigger and bigger cards. So certainly very impactful. And here's a card that I didn't like too much in the deck originally in the limited battle format, as it didn't have great targets outside of the Pacifista Sentamaru engine, but has now made its way into the deck as the meta has shifted into a very aggressive meta. Red, green, all these colors play very impactful 3-drops. Nico Robin, Okiku, Bonnie, Momonosuke, all these cards are very, very good targets. And let's not forget about Zoro as well. But Zoro can be attacked usually with our leader. But those other cards usually get dealt with by the who's who. Very rarely do I want to play this card on curve, as it doesn't, as it is a Dawn -1, and it takes over our Onigashima turn. So it's a little weird but the card is almost a necessary evil as it has a trigger effect. It deals with aggressive decks, and the aggressive decks are really what puts Kaido in a corner. If you're ever able to get Kaido down to 2 life before they get to turn 10, they're very pinned to, pinned as any card that they play from there on out impactfully that's not a king, they're going to have to basically spend their entire turn doing. And if they're very low, you can just overwhelm them with resources and close out the game very, very quickly. So Who's Who allows it, once again, similar to Black Maria, deals with characters and allows for longer game states. And sometimes it just sacks you out of life. It just comes out and it's like, and kill your card that was important, and now you lose. So Who's Who, definitely at 3 seems very, very good. I don't think I'd play him at anything more than that because, again, no combo, and there's already so many non-combos in this deck. But it is, once again, a necessary evil of dealing with very aggressive, very early, strong 3-drops. And then we have 4 Jacks. Jack, sorry, is amazing. We try not to play too many even cards in this deck as, odd cards or 3-cost cards, because the only 3-cost card we care about is Stage. So if we're not playing Stage, we got to play something that's very, very impactful, aka Who's Who and Jack. Now, Jack is a 1k counter, so that's already pretty good with a 4k stat line. Again, very, very good. And its effect is ditch a card from hand or trash a card and gain a Dawn that's not rested. So oftentimes versus aggro decks, it's arguable that Jack might even be better to deploy than an Onigashima because it allows you to play this card on curve, have a 4k, and then whatever they play into this 4k, this card will be able to eat up with just 1 Dawn, contest the board state, while also allowing you to be more aggressive. When you pitch the card, you get an unsuspended or unrested Dawn, so you can then attach it to Kaido and then swing for 6 on your following turn. So it is a nice little power play. It is a 1k counter. It contests board. Very, very much enjoying this card from the structure deck, and I've always liked playing it at multiple values because the point of the game is ramp, ramp, ramp. And I played 2 ultis. Now, this is a deck that I built for my brother literally day 1. I let him borrow it from then on out, and he's been crushing. So on that day, I didn't really have access to all of the cards. I did my best to acquire as many as I could, and ulti just kind of was a 2k counter. The way I feel about 2Ks and the more I've played this game, it feels like there's a nice little sweet spot with the 2Ks, and that seems to be anywhere between, if you can fit them, 9 to 10 2Ks. You want to then have just a little spice, a little sauce of the 1Ks, just so that you can go ahead and like combo weird and odd numbers, so you're not always over comboing with the 2Ks. If you have an abundance of 2Ks, 12, 14, you're going to be over comboing a lot. Some decks might not care about that, aka Blue Purple Crocodile, but decks like Kaido need to be efficient with their combo, as we need to make sure that we get to our late game. So ulti at 2 probably should be more Sasaki's, but we'll get to that later. Definitely still has value. I don't play page 1 as I don't want to bait myself to ever make that combo. Similar to Jesse Spencer, shout out to the first online tournament winner in the Americas. God bless that guy. But yes, definitely 2 ultis. It's a 2k counter, and that's about it. And then for one of the first big boy, Queen. Queen is amongst one of the most powerful cards in the deck, and it just comes from the structure deck at a fantastic stat line of a 5 for a 6k blocker. As a 6k blocker, it is a real number because people are swinging you usually at 5. If you have a 5k blocker, you're not really a blocker. You kind of have to commit cards if you want to keep the card on board. The reason why Boa Hancock is probably one of the only 5k blockers that's made its way into the meta is because with 1 Dawn, you can recycle the card that you're going to pitch with it, right? Because if a 5 is swinging at you, you can block for 5, it draws the card, and then usually that card that you're drawing is equivalent to a 1k counter, and therefore it kind of replaces itself. She's a pseudo 6k blocker in a sense, and she can also offensively draw you a card. She's a 7 Great Warlords of the Sea, which, synergizes with blue. So that's why Boa Hancock is a playable big blocker. Eustace Captain Kidd, 7k blocker. That's a really real number, but 6k is nothing to scoff at. Those, I think, would be the 3 biggest blockers in the meta, and Queen has a fantastic on-play as well. With a 1k counter as well, this card draws you 2, trashes 1, catering your hand, filtering the poopy non-combo cards, your multiple Onigashimas, your multiple Who's Who's that you're not going to need over the long course of the game, gets them out of your hand, while also just drawing you 2 fresh cards that can be counter power, can be your bombs, can be exactly what you need, while also being defensive as well as offensive. As a 6k, this card can turn sideways and end the game. Many times, if you have 2 queens on board, one is almost certainly turning sideways while the other one is staring at your opponent with its big old chunky arms and just defending itself. It is It is a very different card than the Black Maria and the 2K blockers because those kind of just don't care if they die. This card you might almost want to defend because it's also an aggressive card. If your opponent is sending cards at your face, you can defend with it, and by defending with it, then you can contest them on the following turn. And swinging with 6 already contests a 2K. If you're swinging at a 4, it's almost impossible to combo out of. So I don't know how much more I can go into this by explaining how good I think Queen is, but it's most certainly a very, very good card. And then for our following boy, if we've got Queen, we've got King. Now I'm playing 4 of the Structure Deck King, 6 for 7, Mamma Mia. And this is part 1 of the most broken curve that the deck can can muster up. And the most broken curve, you start going first, you go pass on 1 because the deck has no 1-drops, Onigashima on 2, King on 3. That is the old 1, 2, 3, if you will. By deleting a card that with a cost of 4 or less, this deletes almost anything and contests almost anything on the curve. With a 7k body, it's huge. Just 1 Dawn already starts contesting Eustace Captain Kidd. And even though you are paying Dawn -1, Onigashima just lets you evade those taxes left, right, and center. I'm just going to leave this card here as it just really upsets me. But yes, King is really, really good. Really easy to defend. To get around this card, they already got to start swinging at 8s, which is not easy, especially once you've already knocked something out with this King. The deck has so many 2Ks, so many weak blockers that this card is so easy to defend that once it comes down and deletes something, if you're not bouncing it like by the means of Doflamingo or Sobbles, it probably just sticks. Unless you kill it yourself with your Kaido, but that's another story. This card almost certainly just stays for the rest of the game because it's just very, very difficult to push through with the way that the deck plays. And from there, you're already at a good board state that can carry you to potentially just win the game. A couple more hits, a couple Kaidos, bada bing, bada boom, GG. So definitely did like King. Aggressive card and defensive card, and that's just the nature of almost all purple cards. They're not only offensive, they're defensive. And speaking of offense and defense, we've got here biggest Chungus. Well, there is a bigger Chungus, but this is big. This is a big Chungus. He's a 9-drop 10k with that stat line. The moment that he comes down, he goes ahead and minuses 5 Dawn, and it gains Rush while also knocking out something that's a cost 6 or less. Again, knocks out almost any relevant card that isn't a drop Kid, Doflamingo, anything from 7 up. Eustace Captain Kid, the 7-drop Eustace Captain Kid, the 8-drop Doflamingo, Mihawk. And that's about it. It almost knocks out everything else because those are the more relevant big drops in the format. Obviously, in the mirror match, it blows up everything that it isn't itself, or the 7-drop King and the 10-drop Kaido. So it contests almost anything. If you play this card on 9, he doesn't feel that good. If you play this card on 10, oh my god. This card goes, blows something up, swings. It can swing at face, it can swing at something that's rested, and by keeping 1 Dawn up, you're threatening Blast Breath. By threatening Blast Breath, this card now, to beat this, to delete this off the board, you now have to start swinging at 14. And that's just if they have 1 card in hand. If they have 2 in hand, at worst, they have maybe 15 combo power, and you already have to sink in 15 damage. That is 10 Dawn on a leader to even potentially try to contest this card. Excuse me? And even if you don't have the Blast Breath, you can just bait it. You can just pretend like you have it, and then they'll probably never, ever swing into this card. Because if you commit your entire turn to killing this and you don't succeed, you've lost. You've simply you've basically passed the turn, and you are now just dead. And the amount of cards they need to out-combo what you can swing at this with, 2-3 cards while you're sinking in an entire turn. It is very, very good. A very unbalanced card, and one of the best top-end cards in the game, in my opinion. And following it up, one of the best top ends in the game, one of the best combo cards in the game, or event spells, in Blast Breath. For a cost of 1, you gain 4. Yeah, you're minusing 1 Dawn, but again, we have our little buddy over here just paying for all of our sins. And that's just purple, baby. That's literally all it is. Blast Breath is, you can play it at any point in time in the game. You don't feel bad playing it. Even though it might cost you that extra Dawn, you just have to think about what Dawn you're going to be at the next turn. Every turn you gain 2 Dawn at the start, so just try to allow yourself and think, can I minus 1 more Dawn after what I've already paid this turn? Will that get me to my game plan? Will that allow me to get to my 10 faster? Because 10 Dawn is power. And Blast Breath most certainly is a very powerful card. So you just have to learn to play around what your numbers are and look towards the future in terms of those thresholds. And now, those were all the cards from the structure deck, by the way. That's all just structure deck. Yeah, man. If you can get your structure decks for 15 bucks, that's what 30 bucks will get you. Literally 75% of the deck. And I think I've complained about almost every single card I've explained. They're just so good. And then now coming out from the Romance Dawn set, we have more of the 2-cross blockers just because we want to facilitate our game plan. We have a game plan and we're going to stick to it. This card, more than Black Maria, is a little bit better because it has a 3k stat line, meaning 3ks can swing in this deck. Who's who? This gentleman, I'm not going to try to butcher his name because I already butcher enough names in this channel. But this card can turn sideways and be aggressive. It can be defensive. It is most certainly a very good card, and I've been enjoying playing him at 4. I play almost, I think, 12 blockers. It's 8 of the 2-drops and 4 queens. We have 12 just good blockers in this deck. And then following up our 2k blocker, we have 3 Sasaki's. I probably would up him to 4 as he has a more relevant effect than ulti in this deck, because this has a very similar effect to Jack, the 3-drop, that it does ramp you a Dawn, but this is a when attacking effect. Whereas Jack is on play and a 1k counter, this is a 2k counter when attacking. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's just substantially worse than Jack. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. When attacking means it can happen over and over and over again as long as you can defend this card. So this card by itself can almost like stimulate the fact that you don't have an Onigashima Island. He can sort of get you there while also, funnily enough, providing aggressive pressure as well as defense. He's good in hand, he's good on the board, he's good everywhere, and he looks really chunky. He's just a big boy, and big boys are the name of this deck. Big boy control. And then we're going to go ahead and play 4 of what I would agree, or what I would state is probably the best 2k combo power in purple, as it is a card that is, although for a 5 for 5, very poorly statted, it is a 2k, and its on play is really solid. For a -1 Dawn, you get to rip a card out of your opponent's hand. So as they're defending your very strong couple of turns, your kings and your queens are just assaulting your opponent. They're left with very little hand size, very little options. X-Drake, less options. And now their turns become more and more difficult. Not only is this card good in Kaido, it's good in blue-purple Kaido, it's good in blue-purple Crocodile. It's just an overall really solid 2k counter, and I really do like him. And he is the first rare card that we need from this, just from the set. So everything thus far has been a common. It's been 8 commons and 4 rares thus far from the set. And then starting off with our first SRs that we're going to need is King. Now I play 2 of the King because I think King is just almost an auto win versus aggro. This card comes down versus red Zoro versus Luffy versus Law, and it just pummels them. If we're able to who's who, set up a couple weenie blockers, then play this card, we've almost certainly won the game. This card will then pressure them infinitely, as the 7k stat line is just really strong versus most aggressive decks. They can't afford to play as much combo power as other decks can, and we're just chunking them every single turn, eating whatever card we want on the board, and then already deleting 2. Not only are we destroying Bonnies, Nico Robins, Okiku's, 1k counters, the Cat Vipers, all these weird cards, we can swing at them, bait them to then use cards from hand, and then king them to give them less options. And now all of a sudden, they've gone from a commanding position to an immediately losing position. And this card is one of the cards that facilitates that the most. I really do enjoy him. I would even consider bumping him up. And honestly, this card just looks amazing. And for our last SR, so we're playing 4 rares, 2 SRs so far. We play 3 of the 10-drop Kaido. This card is super unbalanced. It's just by its presence, the mere fact that it exists in purple, you constantly have to play around it. You have to play in such a weird way, because this card, you can't overcommit to the board, because if they're going to 10, you just get 10'd. If you undercommit, then you're not putting enough pressure, and then they don't even need to play this card. And then the turns that this card comes out, you can see them from a mile away. The moment that your board is like sideways and they're not swinging at your board and they're just swinging at your face, you're like, oh, I'm gonna get 10 dropped. So it's really hard to say what you want to do at that point, because you have to defend these hits coming in, because this 10 drop will put you on a clock on its own. So you can't even take these hits. Like, let's say they have a queen and a king on board and you had like 3 rested dudes, 6k at face, 7k at face, They 10 drop you. Now your whole board's gone. 5k at face with leader, and you've now had to defend a 7, a 5, and a 6 in one turn. Now there's a 12k that's staring you down, and they're going to tap Onigashima Island. Although they paid 6, they've technically paid 5, so they're going to 7 on the following turn, and in 2 turns, they're literally back up to 10. It's really difficult to deal with board states when they can pump out these quick rampers into the big bombs. This card has beaten me multiple times, and it just is what it is. It's an answer to the 8-drop kid that just naturally lives in our deck. It's an answer to wide board states, an answer to aggro, and it can also be an aggressive card as well. You just swing everything in, you Kaido, swing your face in, and then this card will most likely take damage on the following turn. Now you go to 7, you go king, whatever blocker they put out, and then you're like 6-12. And now next turn they're going to 9, and then they're going to just probably burn you, and you're dead. Bada bing, bada boom, game's over. So I know it sounds a little wild, but literally all that we've spent thus far is 8 commons, 4 rares, 5 SRs, ladies and gentlemen. And then for our last card, I played 2 Thunder Bagua, which honestly, very underwhelmed with how this card performed. Most of the time, I'm defending as heavy as possible because I don't really care. I'm just going to get to my late game and kill you. And then once I have my late game on board and you have to deal with my late game, you're going to have to hit me to try to end the game. And in doing so, I'll double draw. So very rarely do I get the bonus effect from this card. This card seems to be a little bit more niche, fit into the blue-purple decks a little bit more than it fits into the Kaido deck, but it is a 4k counter that has a really nice effect in the trigger zone, as well as, you know, can give you that more 4k. It's just very hard to leave Udon open in this deck, but when you can easily just leave one and do the exact same thing. So that rounds up the deck. If I had to guess how much this deck goes for right now, you know, if you have a friend that's opened a box or 2, you probably have all the commons and even the X-Drakes. And then all you're missing are just 5 SRs and 2 structure decks. So if you guys haven't tried this deck out, I definitely suggest giving it a shot. It is a very inexpensive deck, really accessible, really strong. Once again, not to toot anyone's horn, my brother has been topping events with this deck with little knowledge of this game just by summoning big dudes. I told him, mulligan for Onigashima, defend as much as possible, and summon cards that delete your opponent's board. And deal with the board, then go face. And then if you're ever in a winning position, if you have 1 character on board plus Kaido, think about burning them. If you live by those 4 rules, what more do you need? He doesn't even know what half the cards in the game do, and he's able to just clear out games. It's really just that strong. But I'm sure you guys have seen enough purple decks. If you've been into competitive tournaments thus far, you're kind of aware of what this deck does. I just wanted to show it off, show you another deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for all the support you guys have given me. I'm going to continue creating the best One Piece content that I possibly can. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, good luck in your ventures finding the One Piece. Peace.